Well, today on the program, two things we're going to do. First of all, we will be looking at the president's broadcast this morning. His very first on January 1st, since he became president of Nigeria. He made a few statements, and the guest I'm going to be having joining us, we will dissect that speech and take a look at how it will impact Nigerians in the long run. That will be first part of our conversation. And after that conversation, we'll switch gears to Rivers State. We'll be joined by a governorship candidate in the last governorship election in that state to talk about some of the developments in Rivers State as we step into the new year. And I'm being joined via Zoom by Professor Anthony Killer. He's a professor of strategy. Professor, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Good to be here.
Absolutely, sir. And I must say Happy New Year to you.
Yes, indeed. Happy New Year to you and to everybody. Happy New Year.
All right, we're also being joined by a senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Adeleke Agbola. Mr. Adeleke Agbola, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you, and Happy New Year to you.
All right, gentlemen, just before we get into the conversation, let's take a listen to some of the things the president said. He had mentioned the fact that he understands how Nigerians are really now going through the challenges they are going through, given some of what is considered bold economic reforms is put in place. But he's saying they should not despair. And he talked about the fact that as a government, they are working on developing the environment, looking at things like tax policy reforms and ease of doing business, and the coming upstream of the refineries. Let's take a listen to some of the first things he said.
This new year, we will race against time to ensure all the fiscal and tax policies reforms we need to put in place are codified and simplified to ensure the business environment does not destroy value. On every foreign trip I have embarked on, my message to investors and other business people has been the same. Nigeria is ready and open for business. I will fight every obstacle that impedes business competitiveness in Nigeria, and I will not hesitate to remove any clog hindering our path to making Nigeria a destination of choice for local and foreign investment.
That was not all the president said in almost his 15 minutes broadcast. He talked about workers. He knows and understands, according to him, that they've been struggling, just like every other Nigerian, to make ends meet, and he's promised a review of what he calls the living wage.
The economic aspirations and the material well-being of the poor, the most vulnerable, and the working people shall not be neglected. It is in this spirit that we are going to implement a new national living wage for our industrious workers this new year. It is not only good economics to do this, it's also a morally and politically correct thing to do.
Prof. And Senior Advocate Leonard Selka, I'm sure you may have listened live to his speech or may have read this speech. This is about the fourth or fifth speech he's made in terms of broadcast to the nation. I want to get your impression, first of all, on this particular speech. Let me start with you, Prof. What's your first impression? What did you make out of this speech? More like an overview of the president's speech.
Well, I think, there are five major things to take away from that speech. Number one is the prose. I think it was very well written. There are some flaws here and there, but there are minor flaws. Overall, it's a good speech. That needs to be said. The speech is also good because it shows an understanding of the reality of Nigeria. It says, I know things are tough, and I want you to bear with me. It's going to get better because we're doing the right thing. I think the prose also helped to use some euphemisms there to say, things are not going very well. In reality, things are really, really tough. Things are very bad for a lot of people in terms of the economy. But I think the key thing is that the president, or better still, the presidency, shows that They understand this very tough reality, although they did not use very colorful language for that. The language that was used of do not falter, keep going, that's where the poetry comes in. It does not say, I know you're suffering, I know many people are in poverty, I know many people are begging for money in this season. The president did not say that, but it shows you understand. It also shows the ongoing activity to make things happen. When he says, every step I have taken, every trip I have undertaken is geared towards making things better. I think that's a big thing, to say that I'm really doing my best. I'm doing everything I can do. It also tells you one thing. A president or a presidency that understands the reality and says, I am doing everything to make the reality better, it shows that they know what is wrong. So, they're neither aloof nor daft. So if they don't get it right, they're either mischievous or incompetent, because it is clear that they have a very clear idea of what is wrong. One thing, I would take away, there is a general commitment to say, I shall make sure investments come in, reduce or simplify process and tax. Those are general statements, which I think presidents make. It would have been good to get some action points, to say something like, as from next week, this will happen. I guess you'll see that from the budget or the point. But overall, I think it's a good speech, and I think it's something worthy of a New Year's speech.
All right, Prof, we're going to break that speech down as much as possible, but let me get the impression of the Leonard Silk. Leonard Silk, let me take your impression of that particular speech before we dig deep.
Yes, going through the speech, I'm listening to it earlier this morning. It shows a man who is prepared for the job, who knows what is coming to meet. I'm impressed by the taking out what the issues are, the suffering the Nigerians are going through. There is nothing, nobody can say that people are not suffering. There's a lot of suffering, but the dark come before the dawn. So what the president is more or less saying is that, look, I know you are suffering, but it's going to get better. The body language shows somebody who understands that there's a problem in the country and that is looking out for it. Whether he's doing enough is a different ballgame entirely. There are areas that can be better. There are areas of waste that can be cut off to show the people. The president understands that people are suffering. But specific areas he has identified: farming, agriculture, the electricity situation in Nigeria, the poor salaries that are being earned by the public sector workers, the scarcity of foreign exchange. Those are areas he has quickly identified, and they need to streamline the tax regime because the multiple taxes are really killing businesses in Nigeria. So we just hope that the president will follow up. It's not just be speeches, it will be action. We are hopeful.
Okay, apologies. I thought you were done. Let me go back to Prof and Leonard Silk. We're going to break it down to some of the economic promises he made. I'll mention them, but I'm going to ask some questions before we get to those economic promises. I know he talked about steady power supply through the installation of the power projects when he was mentioning Siemens. I know he talked about the refineries, whether Port Harcourt or Dangote. I know he talked about the implementation of the new living wage, which we played the track as well, tax and fiscal reform policies and reforms and all of that, food security and affordability. Those are some of the promises he made in terms of the economy. But I want to read a quote from that speech and ask you, Prof. He said, "I am not oblivious to the expressed and sometimes unexpressed frustrations of my fellow citizens. I know for a fact that some of our compatriots are even asking if this is how our administration wants to renew their hope. Now, the president appears to empathize with the people. He's done that consistently since those bold economic reforms. But in your view, given what he said and given the action that has been taken so far, is he approaching the redemption of the economy with the needed urgency that is required, in your view?"
No, I think not. And that's the short answer. I think, there's a very high understanding. I think the president and the presidency, I keep repeating, is very high on intention, but I score them low on action generally. It's either because the situation is complex or because what they are planning is not as fast or as impactful as one would have expected. Because it is important that it is not Nigerians generally, it is not me, it is not Prince Adeleke or Prince Agbola who said they're going to hit the ground running. It is the president and the team themselves who brought in that phrase of hitting the ground running. So they don't hit the ground running. It is legitimate to hold them accountable and responsible for that. It is also clear that a lot of this problem they did not create, they met there. But I think very gallantly, the president himself has said, do not pity me. So to those people who want to cry more than the bereaved, who want to explain the president's problem more than the president, I tell them to chill. The man himself knows the problem, and he has said, don't pity me. I think the intention is very high. The understanding is high, but ideologically speaking, I argue that there are some things that should be done differently. For example, there is something about the policy, the spending of money, billions of naira for books, billions of naira for cars, which does not sound well. Now, I tell you, looking at numbers, it is not that those things will save the economy by not buying those cars for legislators, for example, but it will send a signal that the presidency, this administration is sober and serious on action. That is one thing. So if you want to go to the economy, for example, and this is why let's be careful, it is not right or wrong. It is an ideological sort of position. The president is saying it is not only moral, but it's politically right, to increase salaries. Some of us argue that it might be morally right, but the political economy of that is disputable. What we really need is to make things cost less, not to throw more money at people. Because I argue that this idea that everybody is embracing of saying increase salary without increasing production is simply going to cause more inflation. And all the money you throw at people is going to be swallowed by the dark, nasty tunnel of inflation. But I pause there and let's say think about it.
Okay, let me come to you. I'm going to read another quote as well, because when you listen to the president's speech, I noticed, in my view, he had a lot to say about the economy and maybe not much to talk on security. We'll get to that in a moment. So let's dwell on where his big statements were on. He said, I will fight every obstacle that impedes business competitiveness in Nigeria, and I will not hesitate to remove any clog hindering our path to making Nigeria a destination of choice for local and foreign investment. Now, how do you juxtapose that with the exit of GSK, Sanofi, Unilever in terms of production and all of that? This is a president that is committing to say, whatever is going to make us lose business, I will literally say I will fight that thing. But big businesses are leaving the country. So maybe you help me make sense of what's going on here.
Thank you. The issue of some companies leaving Nigeria is really, these are issues that predates the coming to office of President Tinubu. And when you look at those companies, it is a global strategy. It's not limited to Nigeria. You'll be surprised that companies like GSK, even Canada, they exited from it. So it's a global strategy. But on a serious note, we need to do a lot to ensure that businesses are attracted to Nigeria. A situation where some areas, you have about 50 different taxes being paid by a single company on the same product. You do not expect that people will be attracted. Then when people bring in their money to remit foreign exchange and out of the country is almost an impossibility. So those are areas that the government can do for ease of business. When you travel through our Nigeria airports, you'll be shocked at the level of corruption in the system. Our people are not willing to let people go. You travel, SSS, we ask you where you are traveling to, immigration, we ask you, NDLA, we ask you. These are issues that it can streamline. I remember there was one when Oshibajo was acting president, he issued some proclamation as to ease of doing business so that a lot of agencies were removed from the airport. But they are back. So the truth is that when the President Tinubu is somebody who understands business, he understands how to impact the ease of doing business in Nigeria. When as governor in Lagos State, he introduced the 30-day consent rule. But the same Lagos State now is taking almost 4 years to get consent. So these are things that it's not only president that we must talk about. We must talk about the people surrounding him. We must talk about the governors. We must talk about all the people around the area that will make business to boom in Nigeria. So that some companies are leaving, the strategy is how to attract them, to give them the necessary impetus to come back. Nigeria is a big economy, whether you call it 150 million or 200 million. It's a very big economy that people need to invest in. So we just hope that what the president has highlighted will be put into action.
All right, let me come to you, Prof. As I said, the president was big on the economy, and if my producer can help me put up that slide, if it's ready, when he talked about the refinery, he said in 2024, we're moving a step further in our quest to restart local refining of petroleum products with Port Harcourt Refinery and the Dangote Refinery, which shall fully come on stream. So that is from the president's speech this morning. But Prof, I listened to the NNPCL's group CEO, and he mentioned that, look, the coming of these refineries doesn't necessarily mean that prices would dip. It's just for energy security. So should Nigerians be excited?
Well, I mean, I don't know. The DMD of NNPC, the man just came out some kind of anti-climate, wet blankets, party spoiler person. But I guess he's just saying the truth. But it's a very bad truth. We always want people to be truthful, but some truths are bad truths. The whole point, the reason why people were rejoicing for the Dangote refinery and for the Port Harcourt one was a simple assumption that we start refinery, prices will go down. I mean, it's a political assumption, but it's also an economical assumption because people think that, where there's more supply, the price will go down. And the man comes out to say that. I've been looking for him. If you find him, tell him he needs to explain more because that thing is not a healthy thing. I think if the government is rejoicing that there are more refineries, then for the benefit of the people, the government should make sure that more people benefit from such events. And the only way to benefit is if the prices go down. Well, that's the main way, We'll also look at employment, and we should also look at the effect on the refinery on forex of the country. But the main way, and this is the definition, those who are old enough or who have read his work, the late Chief of Bafemi Awolowo used to point out that, well, he taught some of us that the way to judge something is to make sure that more people will benefit from it, using the Jeremy Bentham approach to policy making. The way that more people will benefit from the arrival of more refineries will be if the prices go down. That is what most people will get. Some people will get jobs. Some people will benefit from forex. Some people benefit by supplying those refineries because there will be consultants, there will be vendors, and there will be technical people. But most people, the benefit will be if the price go down. So they really need to make the price go down. But again, you see, unintentional. In all the speech that we're identifying, the president mentioned 5 areas. If he can achieve those 5 areas, we'll be fine. He talked about revamping the economy, restoring security within the borders, revitalizing the industrial sector, boosting agricultural production, and increasing national productivity. If he can achieve those 5 things, make it 6. He even talked about electricity, which he defined, well, I paraphrase him, a sine qua non element, an element without which all the things cannot be achieved. If we can focus on all those 6 things, we're going to be, we're going to be a fantastic country in a short while. That's the trajectory.
All right, Prof. Let me, since you mentioned the issue of the power, is quite important. We've struggled with power almost like forever. This one, I'm asking you, Base, what are you going to advise President Bola Tinubu going forward in 2024 to do to at least give a glimmer of hope to Nigerians? We have about 12 to 13,000 megawatts of installed capacity of power, and we barely scratched a third of that, almost all the time. Sometimes we revolve around 3 to 5,000 megawatts. we're never going above that. I think there was a time we just went slightly above that, and since then, the grid, I understand, collapsed about 12 times last year. So he's saying that, look, power is quite central. That's why I had to talk with the Chancellor, German Chancellor, and all of the things he said at COP28. So this is more like, if you're advising President Bola Tinubu right now, in terms of fixing power, what exactly are you going to tell him? Because if he does that, it's going to leave a legacy. Prof.
Well, I think you've given the advice. Yes, you've given the advice. He needs to remember, if he can do that, that's the legacy thing. So the advice will be, if we need 10, go for 15. Whatever it takes, get it done. How do you do it? How do you do it? You know, the existing agreement should be fully implemented and even fast-tracked. And then we should get more. Where possible, do private partnership. Where possible, study what's wrong. You know, and get it happen. That's the legacy project. Any leader that does that in Nigeria will write his or her name in gold. So it is worth pursuing.
Let me come to you, Leonard Sek. When I was asking Prof about this issue of the refinery, not necessarily guaranteeing that prices will dip, but just to guarantee that, look, at all times we're going to have fuel or PMS in our cars, in our generator, or whatever we use PMS for, which is what the GMD and NPC has said. So, and Prof has been, he clearly stated that, look, what will work for everybody if that price come down? That will be the benefit of everybody. But do you think that the president thinking of increasing what he calls the new, or introducing the new living wage, is more like a markup to meet up the difference it will make if those prices don't dip, in your view?
Well, the truth is that when you look at the refinery situation, the bulk of the money that has been spent on it has been foreign exchange. Look at the Dangote refinery. And a lot of this money were borrowed from international financial institutions. They have to be repaid. So, and NNPC itself is selling oil to the refineries at international prices. So we are not going to expect a drastic reduction in price in the short term. But as time goes on, as debts are paid off, as the country is stabilized, and you have more things coming. Because when you look at this, the refinery is not just a matter of producing petrol. There are so many other byproducts that will be useful for the economy that other industries can take benefit from. So we should not be looking at the short-term issue. It's a disgrace that a country as big as Nigeria, as our producing country, has to be importing a refined product. So that shame, we must remove it in this year, by God's grace. So the president is quite aware of the situation. He has been in the forefront of expanding the national frontier in power production, in fuel, in producing crude, and refining it. We will state the Prof mentioned something about the issue of electricity just now, and that is really something that the president must declare an emergency on. Where I live, which is just a few streets down the street from the polling units of the president himself, we've not, the light situation that's generated in the past 3 or 4 months. We used to have about 20 hours of electricity. We hardly have any now. So there is a serious situation on our hand, that whatever plans you are doing without addressing the electricity situation is going to be for naught. So the president, as the governor of Lagos State, introduced Enron badges at that time, which President Obasanjo shut down. We need something like that as a short-term issue to address rapidly the deteriorating power situation. There is a lot of crisis. At Ikeja, recently, there's something that got burned down. We discovered that it was installed as far back as 1948, and that was serving almost the whole of Ikeja. Now it is done, and that is affecting the life situation in Ikeja. So we have a problem. Yes.
My apologies. I understand we're almost out of time. So let me throw in this one question for you before I go to Professor. He said so many things in his speech today, but I think to the best of my knowledge, I did not see him mention anything that has to do with the killings on the plateau, the carnage that we've experienced in last December. I know he did mention that silently they are working behind the scene to get some people that were kidnapped, released and all of that. But some Nigerians feel that given the number of fatalities that were recorded, which people describe as a carnage on the plateau, since the president is big on empathy, he should have at least mentioned them to give them that sense of belonging as a father of the nation in his first broadcast in January and in a new year. Do you think so?
I agree with you, sir. And I think that was a serious oversight part of the president, because it's not only a plateau. There are so many areas that we're having issues on the security situation in Nigeria. And the president of the foreign nation needs to give hope that things are being done in those areas. Because when you lose up to 200 people on Christmas Day, and you are giving a speech on New Year's Day, and you are ignoring, it appears you are ignoring that issue. I don't think the optics is very bad. He mentioned the issue of security that they are trying to resolve it. Yes, it will take time, but that does not mean you cannot give a nod to those people and commiserate with them.
All right, let me come to you, Prof. Quickly, just, Prof, if you can answer me this in 30 seconds before we head on a break. I listened to him. He said that from the days when he ran as a senator and won, though that exercise was botched, so becoming the governor of Lagos State for 8 years and now the president of Nigeria, one of his cardinal goals is to close the inequality gap. But we've seen that his bold reforms has actually expanded that gap. For those who don't believe what he's saying, what should he be telling them?
Well, I think, he's saying that because he knows that thing does not reflect in his action. He's reassuring people to let them know that is his intention. So the actions are not speaking that way. There is a Hausa proverb, the Karim Agenad, is say that when you tell a blind man to walk, that there is no hole in front of him, he shows there is hole. He's saying that because there is trouble. And it's a good thing he says it, but he needs to walk the walk. At the moment, he's not doing that yet. As citizens, we have to hope that he really becomes that, but so far, no.
All right, thank you so much, Professor Anthony Kila, Professor of Strategy and Development and the Leonard Silk, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Adeleke Agbola. I wish I had time to ask both of you gentlemen about his very strong stance on performance, because some people said our previous president in the past just delegated and let them, but he's saying, look, if you don't perform, I'll kick you out of the room. So, but there's no time to ask all of that. But I must thank you so much for helping us dissect this very first broadcast of January 1st of President Bola Tinubu. Professor and Senior Advocate, thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.